Hello, and welcome to a new edition of Need to Know, a series of video interviews with companies who are shaping, creating, and innovating in the games industry today, and whose work will have a huge impact going forward into the future. Today, I'm delighted to welcome John Robertson, co-founder and director of Indie by Design. Hi, John. How are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Good. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Fantastic. No problem at all. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me here in this conversation. I'll get you to introduce yourself in just a moment, but for our viewers' benefit, our talk today will be discussing what to think about when taking a demo to a show and demonstrating it on the floor. So, John, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what Indie by Design is all about?
Yeah, so as you said, I'm John Robertson, co-director of Indie by Design, and we specialize in consultancy services primarily across game design, media communication strategy, and the market viability of video game products. So we work with publishers and developers, big and small, from the world's biggest platform holders down to, well, not down to, but also as well as development teams that are just starting up or little indie studios. And our sort of mission statement, one of the sort of biggest values that we add, is to provide an external objective perspective on their ideas, their goals, their plans throughout development, and the marketing of their games. So I guess that's a very wordy, formal way of saying that. I mean, we work with teams to try to maximize the quality and success of their games.
Wonderful, fantastic. Well, brilliant. Let's jump in then. So, show demos. How should we be thinking about them, and what are they for ultimately?
Yeah, so I think the most powerful and meaningful way to think about them is that they're a tool to really get players, media on side with your game as a concept, with your game as essentially a brand. And I don't mean that in terms of a giant company, but sort of like the brand. What's your game offering out there in let's be honest, in um, an increasingly competitive space in which it's harder to get visibility. More and more games being released every year. Um, so we talk to a lot of teams, we consult on a lot of projects, and we really try to promote the idea that the demo is something that is an emotive promise of what the game is going to be, what the final game is going to offer, the aspirations around what it offers to the player, rather than thinking of it as a mini version of the game or a vertical slice of the game. I mean, a lot of people in the past have thought about demos as vertical slices, and they do certainly have a value. Um, but we tend to think that the value of a vertical slice is more on the kind of publisher side, and it's showing these are all the different elements. This is how good we are as game developers. We can make this work. Whereas demos, we believe they're most powerful when you can capture the emotions of players, capture their imaginations. And certainly at a show, you don't have a lot of time either. So focusing on getting those emotive responses is most of the time better than trying to fire loads and loads and loads and loads of content at a player and show your mechanical and technical skills. I mean, if you're trying to get people on side, right? You want them to go away, tell other people about your game. You want them to be interested to see what's coming next for your game. And yeah, this is your chance to create that emotional connection between you and the player and the demo. So if you can do that, then your demo is probably going to be a success, because people will come back to the things that they have an emotional connection to. So they're going to come back. They're going to see more of your um, more of your game. So I mean, this might be a bit of an unwieldy kind of comparison, but if you think about how sort of cars, I suppose, are test driven, like the promise of something like a Ferrari isn't in necessarily the technical aspects of the car, whilst they might be very impressive. Really, you know, the dream about a Ferrari is it's a passion. It delivers on the passion of driving, and it's a status symbol, essentially. And that's what test driving a Ferrari is all about. You create that emotional connections. The finer details of that can come later. That can come in a brochure. They can come when you're looking online. And I think that same kind of thing rings true for demos. You really try to figure out what is the emotional connection that you're trying to sell, that your game is built around, you know, which presumably, hopefully, you have when you're designing your game in the first place and building it around certain pillars. Hopefully those pillars are something like, we want players to come away feeling like this, we want players to be rewarded through this. So if you've got those already, then really, you know, build your demo around that, create that emotional connection, and people will want to follow you and play more, which is ultimately the goal of demoing your game at a show.
Absolutely. So sort of more selling the dream, as it were, rather than sort of listing all the individual features, perhaps, that in the game that you've put together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, on that note, then, I mean, it might be interesting to sort of talk about what to, I mean, how would you go about deciding what to include in the demo content itself?
Yeah, so I think this is hard to have a blanket answer for all games, because obviously all games are incredibly different. That's one of the strengths of the industry, right? And there are new games coming up all the time. But it's going back to those pillars, focusing on those pillars, and presenting those in a form that is digestible in what is presumably going to be a short amount of time, to both capture someone's attention and keep them there. You know, attendees at shows are going to want to play lots of games. You know, if you're lucky enough to have a queue, then you'll have a queue that you want to keep moving. You don't want to keep people waiting too long. So you need to kind of get a quick-ish turnaround. So and on the you don't necessarily need to have a vertical slice. That doesn't mean that you don't need depth. It just means that you don't necessarily need as much breadth as your final game is going to provide. So provide players something that gets to the heart of the game, a demo that gets to the heart of the game, gets to the heart of the gameplay loop and the emotion that comes out of that. I mean, that's quite general, but that really is so important, I think, to figure out what that core gameplay loop is and where the value is in that. And if we use a recent example of a demo that I think that's unfortunately now been taken away from Steam, taken off of Steam since the full game came out, but in their case, it makes sense to do so. And that's Balatro, the kind of roguelike poker game. Now, the demo for that could somewhat be considered a vertical slice, but a heavily manipulated form of a vertical slice that got to the core gameplay loop and the rewards much quicker than or much more often than the full game does. I mean, it's a roguelike, so there's going to be a lot of variance in the forms, in the different runs that you're going to have. But they created a demo which limited the amount of randomness there was in the run, and that allowed them to provide a certain kind of run more often, which represented for them a run that was rewarding and allowed them to allowed players to experience key aspects of the gameplay pillars basically every single time. Now, that wouldn't necessarily be possible if you were providing an honest, well, I say honest in sort of inverted commas, because I'm not saying that their demo was dishonest, because it does provide a certain repeatable, an experience that is repeatable in the full game. But it's dishonest in that it's again that randomness, that variation has been taken away. So they limited the amount of sort of modifier cards that you can get, and different things that would pop up were much narrower in volume than they are in the final game. And that's a really clever way of showing the depth of your game, but removing some of the breadth. So their vertical slice was almost like a vertical slice of variance in which they limited the kind of experience that you're going to see. And that really gets to the heart of this. They highlighted these are the kinds of emotions that our game best serves players, and then they created a demo which served that experience every single time, even though that exact experience is no longer available in the final game. That precision of experience is not available in the final game. The demo gives an honest presentation of the dream and the kinds of emotional rewards that game can offer. So yeah, I think that's, again, it's hard to have a one size fits all approach because games are so different. But if you can get to that heart of what makes your game good, what makes it rewarding, what makes it emotional for players, and deliver something that in a short time, 15, 20 minutes, probably, maybe up to half an hour, make sure every single player comes away feeling that. Even if they like it, great, that's what we want. If they don't like it, well, you're not going to please everyone. But it's getting that honesty there, so that you want the right players to come back and play your game again.
Absolutely, I think that's really interesting. Obviously, that kind of game capitalizes on the sort of the roguelike sort of procedural generation and random elements, and that's a massively important part of the gameplay there. But for the purposes of a demo, obviously some of those sort of avenues and strands and possibilities wouldn't necessarily make the most sense, and could leave people with a less decent sort of overview of the game as a whole compared to
absolutely. Yeah, sorry. And I think one more thing just to pick up on that is that it's only the creator of that demo that knows necessarily that the experience has been modified in that way. The player doesn't know. The player still has a sense of this is all random, this is all emergent, this is all as is in the final game. So it doesn't. It's not so much pulling the wool over their eyes, even though it is a little bit. But yeah, it's important just to keep that in mind, that the player doesn't see behind the curtain, basically. So you don't need to worry about that side of it too much.
Absolutely. So I guess with players, with the player in mind, I mean, who is this demo for? And I guess how does the demo fit within I don't know, like your wider marketing and comm strategy? How does that all fit together?
Yeah. So I think it's important to think about your demo a long way ahead of time, if you can, and understand why you're showing this demo content at this time, at this show, and how it was set. It either builds upon what you've already released, or will set the foundation for what's coming, whether that's trailers, press releases, interviews that you're doing. You want to try to make sure your demo content chimes with all of those things. I mean, that doesn't mean that you have to limit your trailers and your press releases, your interviews, to only talking about the stuff that's in your demo, but it's probably helpful to get some sort of synergized, I mean, there's a bit of a buzzword, but synergized, cohesive is probably a better word, cohesive sense of what your game is. Like if you're, again, this sounds so obvious, but it's worth pointing out. But if your demo is set in a dark, sort of moody environment, then it's probably quite confusing to then have people spread the word through word of mouth, to have media write previews about your game, and then you're releasing a trailer that shows bright sort of summery environments or whatever. You don't want to create any confusion, basically, around what people have played and then what they're seeing through other non-demo showings of your game. I think another thing to consider is whether or not, and this is a big one nowadays, and it's increasingly important with things like Steam Next Fest and demos being available on online for in line with shows like PAX and stuff. are you going to put your demo online? And that's a big one. And we'd recommend that typically you probably do want to do that. So you're capitalizing on any extra word of mouth, sort of turnover, player increase in player numbers that you can get through word of mouth. If someone goes to a show, they tell their friends about it. Those who didn't go to the show, then those friends can go and play it online. They subsequently go and tell other friends about it. That can be really powerful. The sort of slight dissonance there is that sometimes some of the rules that you might use to create a demo for a show aren't necessarily the ones you want to use to create a demo to be played online, because you're not, well, most obviously you don't have the time restriction at show, but still, if you can convert more players to playing your demo through the word of mouth or through people reading articles online, and then going to play your game, and then say hitting that follow button on Steam, hitting that wish list on Steam, then that can be incredibly powerful. And again, I think, just to reiterate here, you don't need to really do understand who your demo is for. You don't need to appeal to everyone, and understanding who your likely audience is and how you're going to grab their attention and focus your attention grabbing maneuvers on them is much more powerful than trying to appeal to everyone. It really is. But it's the old sort of cliche, but if you try to appeal to everyone, then you probably end up appealing to no one. So be specific, and don't worry if not everyone loves what you're showing.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic advice. I mean, yeah, there's thousands of games, and each has a wonderful niche that it's sort of carved out for itself. So capitalizing on where you fall in that, and knowing your audience is crucial, really. So I think it'd be interesting as well to sort of talk about, well, understand how best one can talk about a demo.
Yeah, so it's important, obviously, to want to encourage people to want to play your demo at a show, and that could be having amazing banners and hearing other, again, the word of mouth spreading throughout the show and people coming to play you. But again, or additionally, if you can have that 20-second elevator pitch ready, just to, I don't know, grab people who are passing by, give them the 20-second pitch, point out your game, and practice that. Really practice that. And again, this comes down to understanding the pillars of your game and exactly what it is that's important and rewarding and unique about you. Promote all of that in your 20-second pitch. And here as well, be emotive. Don't be too technical, would be my advice. Like, understand the genre that your game is in and use genre specific language where necessary. But don't overly rely on a jargon, because one, it will put people off potentially who are not as sort of au fait with that kind of thing as you are, or presumably many of the people watching this are. But also, if you relied on jargon too much, or sort of genre terms, it runs the risk of your game feeling less interesting and less unique than it could well be. So, yeah, make sure you've got your 20-second elevator pitch. Try to use emotive, natural language. I'm really focused on that, and your confidence as well will shine through. Like, even if people aren't necessarily immediately sold on the genre or the art style or anything, whatever it is, if you're really passionate and really enthusiastic, and I'm not saying you need to be a natural showman, you don't need to be a pop star or anything, but if you just that confidence and that belief in your own work, the same with any walk of life, really, like that is that's infectious, and that will really shine through. So that's pre showing people the demo, and afterwards, again, it's trying to cultivate that sense, take advantage of everyone, all these eyes that you've got on your demo, and try to use that to craft that sense of or increase that community following that you've got afterwards. So provide easy means for them to follow you on Steam, follow you on social media if you use that. Yeah, really try to just give them something that makes it easy for them to pass a game on through word of mouth, through sharing stuff on whatever platforms. And yeah, and it's not just sharing as well, it's making it easy for you to share stuff with them. So share when new demos are coming out, new trailers are coming out, updates on release schedule, whatever it is, try to just try to not have this be the last time you ever communicate with them, basically.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I think that's solid advice. John, I mean, we've got a little bit of time. Maybe there are some other sort of pearls of wisdom that you'd like to impart on demo.
Yeah, I mean, there are some other things away from this is just kind of more general show advice, really. I'd recommend being quite thoughtful about how many people on your side you take to the show. I mean, it might sound a bit crude, but eventually, you're going to want to go to the toilet. You're going to want to get something to eat. You're going to, you might be stuck in conversation with someone who's just played your game, or you're explaining to them how to play the game. You probably don't want to just leave the booth, empty. So have people who can kind of take up or can kind of rotate roles a little bit. Again, if you're a single person there and you're there for I don't know, 8 hours a day. If I don't know whatever show it is, but if you're there for 8 hours a day and you're there for 3 days in a row doing that, that's absolutely exhausting.
A
I
lot
would
of time
recommend.
on your feet, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a serious endurance event, and there's not a lot of training you can do for that apart from just going to shows all the time. But even that, even the most experienced individual, I would heavily recommend not being there by yourself if you can help it. I think another key one is you'll see other demos at the show, around you, or you'll hear about other demos that are doing well. I'd say don't worry about them. It's not to ignore them. You can appreciate them and learn from them, but don't worry about seeing stuff that they're doing that you're not doing, because that will happen. There'll be things that other people are doing. They're given the volume of demos it shows now. There will be things that you'll see other people doing that you haven't done, and you'll wish that you had, and you'll see it as a great opportunity, or a great opportunity for them, a missed opportunity for you. But I would say just make sure you've got that plan. Make sure you've got your core pillars of your game sorted out. You know how to talk about your game. You know who you're aiming at, and as long as you stick to that, you'll be totally fine. And then yes, go away and learn from those other teams, those other demos that you saw. But yeah, don't change your plans at the last minute, or don't change what you're doing or how you're talking about the game at the last minute, or at the show. That's that's a recipe for disaster, really. So yeah, just focus on you, stick to your plan, but with a view to obviously learning with every single show that you go to, and you'll be totally fine.
Brilliant, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, John. I really, really appreciate your time today.
Yeah.
Very, very kind of you to talk to me.
No,
And thank you so much. I appreciate it.
yeah.
And thank you today for our audience who have tuned in to catch this video. There's plenty of other need to know videos out there on our Ukie TV channel on YouTube. And thank you so much for enjoying this one, and more soon. Thank you so much.